I, female, 25, fully admit before I start this story that I was a bit of a deadbeat and a burden on my parents in my younger days. I mean, I only moved out last year to stay with my boyfriend Andrew, male, 27. Apart from that, I dropped out of college, was addicted to weed, and didn't care about progressing up the career ladder. However, I had a bit of an epiphany recently about how my time here is limited and I'm kind of wasting it. And that got me off my ass. My parents have been supportive of me when I was down and celebrating my successes on my journey up. I set up a well paying business managing influencers now, and Andrew and I are thinking about our first house. The only person who isn't cheering me on is my stepsister Lorelei, female, 27. My mom got remarried about 7 years ago, and I don't have much beef with my stepdad. He's a nice enough guy, and I respect his authority, but Lorelei is just a complete a-hole. She used to constantly sabotage my relationships and disrespect me for being dumb and a failure. I mean, I get that I dropped out and wasn't on the traditional track to success like her, but she always made me feel inferior. Lorelei went to a super fancy college with a great SAT score and currently makes six figures. However, despite doing so well, she has her problems. Her high salary made her financially reckless and she's neck deep in debt right now. It got so bad that my stepdad had to pay for an accountant to come and sort out her mess. She still walks around in Jimmy Choos. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of it is a facade. However, I've never stooped to her level and called her stupid for being, well, financially stupid. I know I'm not on the same level as her right now, but my business is doing well, and I don't need my parents' help anymore. I thought that I could get a leg up because one of our extended relatives passed away recently. He's from my stepdad's side of the family, who are already kind of wealthy, but this fella was a multimillionaire. I met him a few times through gatherings and kept in touch with him because he shared my passion for art and other hobbies. When he passed, he left a significant amount of money to my stepdad, Lorelei, and, well, me. I was a little confused at first, but accepted it graciously. Neither my stepdad nor his family thought it was wrong of me to get a share in the inheritance, and I was planning on using it to save for my dream wedding with Andrew. We're not engaged yet, but both of us have discussed getting married when we're financially stable and ready. However, this plan changed after I got a call from my mom. She told me that Lorelei had recently gotten engaged and wanted to plan her wedding for the coming spring. However, due to her bad credit score, she wasn't able to take out a loan or afford the things she wanted. In that frustration, she lashed out at my mom and told her that your daughter doesn't even deserve that inheritance anyways. She only knew Uncle X for a few years, and it just feels unfair that I could have used that money for my dream wedding. Okay, but the thing is, she already had an inheritance, right? Well, Mom told me that she'd blown through it already and hadn't even used it to pay off her debts. Gosh, this woman was unhinged. And then Mom sweetly asked me whether I would consider giving my inheritance to Lorelei so she could have her dream wedding. Sensing that I was hesitating, she began guilt-tripping me about how she had always supported me when I was doing nothing. And Lorelei needed this milestone in her life. She even said, "Besides, you and Andrew live together anyways, right? What's the big deal?" I felt hurt, but also convinced myself that I needed to help Lorelei. This wasn't the first time my mom had chosen my stepsister over me. I guess she and I never got along because she's staunchly traditional and hates the fact that I didn't do things the right way, and Lorelei seemed like a chance at a daughter who was more her style. After all of the guilt tripping she did, I didn't have a choice but to hand over the money to my stepsis. I told Andrew about it, and he wasn't mad about the money, but felt bad about me having to give up this windfall. He told me that I was worth more than caving into my mom, but I guess I just wasn't ready to hear it. When I first met Lorelai's fiance, though, I immediately knew something was up. This guy was sketchy as all hell. He didn't really mention what he did as a job and skirted around every question regarding his life. And whenever he did mention anything, it was sketchy. I was 90% sure he was a gold digger and started dating Lorelai because of her lifestyle. I met the couple at a family dinner, and all my stepsister could talk about was what she would do at her wedding. I also found out that her fiance, Luca, wasn't a US citizen, and basically marrying my stepsister gave him a green card. I also found out that they had only been dating for a month before he proposed. Honestly, this guy's vibes were just off, and I wanted to test that. I admit I may also have wanted to mouth off to my stepsister a little because all the wedding talk was getting to me. So I casually asked her if the inheritance would help out enough or if I should chip in a bit more. Luca's ears perked up and he asked what this inheritance was. Lorelei seemed really embarrassed and said, "Oh, it's nothing, babe. You know, I got us covered." Girl, she was so blind to how money hungry her husband to be was. Just because she was in love. I can't believe our parents didn't say anything. Luca and Lorelei began having a hushed conversation as soon as the inheritance was brought into question, and I could tell that they were on the brink of arguing. After a little while, they ended up leaving the dinner early. I didn't think it would turn into a big deal, but I got a text from Lorelei the very next morning claiming that Luca wanted to put the marriage on ice for a while because he figured out that Lorelei was in debt. My mom also blames me for acting maliciously, and I'm beginning to feel like I should have just kept my mouth shut. AITA? Update 1. I spoke to a few people after I was grilled by Lorelei and Mom, and they think it was justified for me to lash out the way I did, although everyone does agree it was a little immature. Andrew thinks that, in a way, I ended up helping my stepsister dodge a bullet. She went back with Luca at her home, but I think they've broken up. There's been radio silence from Lorelei for a couple of weeks, so that might be the case. The only people in my family who aren't getting on my case right now are my bio dad and my stepdad. I mean, my bio dad isn't really aware of the situation, and he's thinking about it quite subjectively. But my stepdad also feels like I probably helped his daughter out. If her fiance is going to leave just because the wedding isn't completely financed by the wife, there's probably a lot more wrong with him than meets the eye. As for the inheritance money I gave, I haven't gotten it back yet, but I think I should ask for it back. I'll see if I do and keep you guys posted. Update 2. It's confirmed Lorelei and Luca broke up, and in a pretty spectacular fashion. Apparently, he ended up skipping town and took a bunch of my stepsister's expensive stuff with him. She has called the cops on him, and it turns out this guy has a prior record as well. Basically, my suspicions about him were pretty much confirmed, and now Lorelei's in a world of hurt. However, even though I didn't do much beyond unearthing the bad motivations Luca had, my stepsister still tends to think I was the driving force behind her breakup. I also ended up asking for the inheritance back as I found a more immediate way to use that money to help my business expand. I have a few people interested in investing in what I do too, and things are picking up a lot of pace. I won't lie, on the financial end, I might end up overtaking my stepsister in a couple of years. I asked my mother about it, and she reluctantly said, "Do whatever you want. It's not like you care about your sister anyways." I had just about enough of her behavior, though, so I was going to go off on her. But then my stepdad overheard what my mom had said. He said, "I could say the same for you. It's like you don't care about your girl. I think her business is doing great, and it's not like Lorelei is getting married anytime soon." This shut her up right away, and I can't help but feel grateful to my stepdad for his support. Update 3. Coming back to you all with some surprisingly positive news. I guess Lorelai ended up going to a therapist to deal with her breakup, and part of that journey made her realize that I wasn't the villain in her story. She called me and apologized, and while I accepted it, a lot of other stuff came out of the woodwork, particularly how I felt about her treating me as an inferior. I won't say everything is resolved right now, but we're working through it. As for my mom, unfortunately, things are still a little icy between us, even though Lorelai and I are on better terms now. Honestly, I would probably be overthinking it a lot more before. But this whole experience has made me realize that I need to stick to my guns. I should never have given over the inheritance money in the first place, to be honest. But things are generally on the uptick for me, and I think I can walk away from this without feeling like trash. NTA, I think your mom and stepsister need to get their priorities in order. I simply can't wrap my head around how your mom is showing such blatant favoritism. OP, you should have stuck up for yourself much before this. NTA, but I feel a little confused about why you chose to pipe up at the dinner. Sure, it had a good ending, but what if Luca wasn't a shady person? Then you would have been an AH, but your mom and stepsister are ones too. Next story. I live in an apartment near my college with two roommates, Emily and Kate. We're all 20s female. The conflict is mainly between Emily and me. So, for context, my mom and I call each other every day and usually a couple of times a day. It's nothing major. I call her when I'm walking back from one of my classes. She calls me when she's making lunch. I call her before I go to bed, etc. The calls combined aren't ever more than 30 minutes, and it's mainly just to check in with each other in our spare time. She doesn't go crazy if I don't call at all. She just assumes I'm busy and we text each other good night. My roommate Emily always had something to say about it and always brushed it off because she's also my friend, so I just assume it was her being annoying for fun. Anyway, she tells me, "It's really weird you still call your mom every day. It's like you have some unresolved issues or something." I look at her and point out she hasn't spoken to her parents at all since we've been back in school from winter break and hasn't seen them in over 3 months. I say, if anything, you might have some mommy issues since you've been ignoring her for 3 months now. Now, both her and Kate, who has always been closer to Emily than me, are saying that I overstepped and people can have different relationships with their parents. But in my head, if they say that, then she doesn't have to comment that I call my mom too much. AITA here? NTA, they open the door to this convo by commenting on your relationship with your mother. It's hypocritical for them to be upset when you comment on her relationship with her mother. And I'm no therapist, but it sure sounds like your relationship with your mom is healthier than Emily's for sure. If I didn't talk to my parents for like 3 weeks, they would be calling me to make sure I wasn't dead or arrested. 3 months is nuts. ESH. If she feels she can comment on your relationship with your mom, with which there are no issues, then it seems only fair that you can comment on her relationship with her mom. Both comments are negative or insult oriented. So you both were rude to each other. I mean, your comment was warranted, but it's still considered the AH move. You could have just left it that you have a good relationship with your mom. ESH. The roommate should mind her own business. As long as the calls are not disrupting her, I don't see what business of it is hers to begin with. Is it a lot? Sure, but you two are close and seem to also be friends. As long as it's healthy on both sides, and I think it's nice that you two are close. OP could have said it is none of her business, but then proceeded to say that she has a messed up family because her roommate doesn't talk much to her family. As someone who has little contact and knows others for different reasons as well, it is very aggravating when people with close relationships pass judgment on situations they know nothing about and say, "It is my fault I'm not close." So yeah, ESH seems appropriate. Next story. My sister asked and I told her, but Even before I answered, I suspected she didn't want to hear what I'd have to say. My sister's expecting her first child. She's not sure if they're a boy or a girl yet, but she started compiling names. I teach elementary kids, and my girlfriend teaches high school, so we are around a lot of kids of different ages. My sister has a love for old fashioned names. Names top of her list are Judith, Margaret, Dorothy, Ethel, Harold, Donald, Albert, and Eugene. My sister and her husband were having some disagreements on names because he felt like the names my sister like are too old fashioned. She argued again that, but he said he doesn't think any child would use those full names in school or with friends. She said they're beautiful, and look at how many Elizabeths and Charleses there are in the world who are young and only use the full name. So she decided to ask me what my experience was with kids, and I told her that in the classes I have taught, none of the kids with classic or old fashioned names go by the full older name. They all go with a more modern nickname. She was already angry, but asked about my girlfriend's experience with older kids, teens. And I said, from what she has said, it's the same. She asked, what happens if we use their full name? And I told her, I always respect what my kids want to be called, and so does my girlfriend. My sister went a little crazy on me and said, just because I don't like the names doesn't mean I should discourage others from using them. I reminded her that she asked me about my experience, that I did not offer it out of nowhere. She told me my snarky little comment about modern nicknames was enough. She said I was calling my future niece or nephew's name ugly already. AITA? NTA. Don't ask questions you don't want the answer to. If she wanted an echo chamber, she should have asked that before asking her ridiculous question. You and your girlfriend do right by the kids, calling them what they request. My son likes to be called Char. Yes, short for Charizard. At school, because in the past there were multiple kids with his name in his class. I can't stand it. But everyone at school respects his request and calls him Char. Your sis will have to learn that she's cooking a little human inside of her, that little human will want things different from her, and she will need to accept that. NTA. She asked, you answered. Maybe she's a little emotional because of the pregnancy, or it might be because it is 3 against 1 at this point. And you didn't discourage her from naming her kid any particular name. You just told her that kids usually shorten their names if they tend to have the said names. It wasn't your opinion. It was something that you and your girlfriend see happening. Next story. I'll be the first to admit that I grew up in a very hands-off type of family. There was no hugging, snuggling, or anything of that sort. So when I met my wife and saw her 3 kids love her so much, it did make me incredibly uncomfortable. But that was a me issue, and I just checked myself into therapy and worked through it. Now the kids are like this with me, and sometimes it's still hard, but it doesn't make me nearly as uncomfortable as it did. However, my wife is fully aware of this because through therapy, I was taught ways to communicate these things to her. So I never asked the kids to stop and never tried forcing my opinions, but I did communicate why I became so weird about it. So she knows. Anyways, fast forward to now. My stepkids are currently 13, 11, and 7. All of them are still very much so snuggly kids and easily wrap my wife up on the couch 4 times a day. The only issue I currently have is that my wife is currently pregnant, high risk. They have her on bed rest and she's only 16 weeks. I simply do not like how rough the kids seem to be with her, though they might not actually be super rough. It seems like it to me, and I'm worried about my wife and my unborn child. Like my 7-year-old stepson will still lay on his mother's chest. Granted, he also is a small kid and has some ailments, ASD and ODD. I don't want him laying on his mother's chest. Or the 2 older ones will lay beside her, but like half on her. I don't want them doing this either because their legs, half of their torso is on top of their mother's stomach. And again, she's high risk. I don't want them unintentionally hurting her. So whenever I see it now, I either tell them to stop or constantly remind them to be careful of their mother's stomach. My wife flipped yesterday. She never snaps, but she absolutely did this time and told me quite bluntly to shut my freaking mouth. Because if my attitude makes it so her kid stops snuggling her, she will never forgive me. Insists she is fine and she wasn't, she would say something. It's been tense here. AITA? YTA, your wife is pregnant. She isn't a porcelain doll to be placed on a shelf. It is not okay to tell her she can't cuddle with her kids. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.